Well, if you've been on social media at all over the past 2 weeks, you've surely seen videos and posts about fans from around the world descending on North America to watch their teams in the World Cup. I'm guessing most of you have seen that this is happening. Is that correct? So some of these fans have gone viral for sharing about things that we take for granted. Reverend Catherine read this to me, and I'm not going to read it to you, but there's one about chips and salsa that's quite lovely. And the main point is this person is blown away that it's free, even saying at one point, we haven't earned this. These other videos, they show people experiencing Taco Bell and Waffle House for the first time, that mega gas station Buc-ee's. Has anyone been to a Buc-ee's before? Yes, a few of you, right? Yeah. Some people going to Walmart and experiencing that and finding one of those big bags of pre-popped popcorn, and what someone from England saying, it's the size of an adult's arm. I gotta get the joke right, but it's talking about an adult's arm, the size of this bag. He's just blown away. Another person talks about how cold we keep our buildings. It's hot outside, but then you step inside and it's like a winter's day. They're blown away by free refills, and also that we evacuate swimming pools when there's lightning nearby. One French man went to Costco and found a 120 pack of Keurig pods for coffee pods. A Japanese fan was loving Texas, and he says, everything is so big. And then there's the German fan that's become so popular that now celebrities and athletes are buying him fancier hotel rooms and supplying him with all the team swag because he keeps posting about all these wonderful things he's finding here in the United States. It's all been so heartwarming to watch their reactions, their experiences as they explore this new world called America. And there's a little bit of that same approach to the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy, recording as it was the Israelites' experiences making their way to a new world. But it seems the Israelites weren't having quite the same time as World Cup fans. Instead, we find increasing violence, growing complaints, repeated misremembering of their story, and challenges to Moses' leadership that ultimately prove unsuccessful. It all explains a bit about the order of the first few books of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. If you're trying to understand and follow along on the narrative, you begin in Genesis, and then you go to Exodus, and then you skip a book and you go to Numbers, and then you skip another book and you get to Joshua, and that's how the narrative goes. But then you have these two books we skipped over that are sandwiched in there. Leviticus, the book of purity rituals, especially coming on the heels of the golden calf incident. And then you have Deuteronomy serving a similar role. It pauses the story, this kind of time out in the story, an excursus, if you will. And it's at the end of Moses' life, and it is giving him the chance to reiterate all the truths and the story that the Israelites seem to keep forgetting within the narrative of Exodus and Numbers. So it's a goodbye speech, a farewell speech, a final discourse from Moses, Deuteronomy is, in which he includes a reminder of the Ten Commandments and the laws, and importantly, where he offers a direct call to the people to choose between life and death. It's offered within the context of what's unfolded in the book of Numbers that we've covered over the past few weeks. The story goes that because the people doubted God, they could not enter into the promised land. And instead, God's promise would continue on in their children and their grandchildren. And the same thing happens to Moses. He's told he also will not enter the land. And that's where we find ourselves this morning, at the end of Deuteronomy. And it's a poignant moment, actually. This man who has given his life to leading these people, and now at the end of his life, he's unable to make it into or to his destination. But it's also tender because this scene ends with him on another mountaintop. Just him and God alone together again. It's intimate and familiar. And Moses is allowed to look out on the land that promise that will continue on after him. And then down the mountain, closing out the story, the people, not those who were freed from slavery in Egypt, but their children and their grandchildren, gathering on the riverbanks, listening to their new leader Joshua as they prepare for what's to come in the book of Joshua. In another narrative on journeying, Don and Rodney set out to cross the U.S. on the brink of the apocalypse. In this book, we burned so bright. The world is facing its demise, the work of a rogue black hole that suddenly appears in our solar system. Don and Rodney are a gay couple who've been together for 40 years, and they're on a mission to get from Maine to Washington before everything disappears forever. And the reason for their trip, it'll unfold as you read along, and I'm not going to give that away. They're on this trip, and the pressure mounts as time continues to be sucked away from them. And it, too, is a poignant story, and profound in what it unpacks at the precipice of life and death. Along the way, they encounter all kinds of people, good and bad, people in denial and depression, people at peace with what's coming. And it appears that Don and Rodney can't find peace until they accomplish the mission that they've set out on. Like I said, I'm not going to ruin it for you. I think it's a worthwhile read. At least I'm not going to ruin it for you as to whether they make it or not. But along the way, they continue to wrestle with these deep philosophical questions of meaning and purpose. Whether anything is fated or if it's all chance, why some people respond the way they do to hardship, how they themselves have responded to hardship. And it's all wrapped up in a touching love story. In some ways, the book itself becomes a love story about life, about humanity and creation and what matters. At one point, Don and Rodney are talking with someone named Jerry, whom they meet when gravity is starting to act all funny because of this black hole. And Jerry says to them, "It'll all be gone soon. No one will be left to remember what we did here. No one will remember all the good and terrible things people did." "Do we live to be remembered?" Don asked. "Or do we live to live?" "I don't know that we deserve to be remembered," Jerry said. "But then there's a part of me, a big part, a human part, that says I'm wrong. That even with all our faults, we did something special. We were something extraordinary. Of all the chances in the universe, what's the likelihood that we'd have survived long enough to love and hate?" Maybe that's what the point of all of this was. To have these random moments of collision, to learn from each other, to hear stories, she said. "To live," said Rodney. I would say that'll preach. And I think it already was preached. I think that's what the authors of Numbers and Deuteronomy are saying. It's why they framed the end of Moses' life how they did, giving him a farewell speech. That's essentially the entire book of Deuteronomy, having him reiterate what matters, the importance of trusting in God and following God, but also the importance of being together and treating each other right. The outlines of how to live together read as a boring litany of commandments to us, but in the context of this epic, it's a reframing of what they did well and what they didn't quite master. And it all reinforces the same question that Jerry was processing with Don and Rodney in this book, We Burned So Bright. Do we deserve to be remembered? And what if we can't guarantee that anyone will remember us? Then what? Do you still live to be remembered? Or do you live to live? I'm moved by the storytelling in Numbers and Deuteronomy, witnessing Moses' life end as it does, disappointing on the surface, but in the end, he didn't actually fail. And in the end, he's with God, as was always the case, only it's really clear here at the end. It's a reprise of Mount Sinai when he received the Ten Commandments from God, and it's also a reprise of the lens of this entire saga that we've mentioned each week. That familiar little blessing at the beginning of the book of Numbers. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God's countenance be upon you and give you peace. Moses didn't fail. Moses was faithful to his calling. And the end of Deuteronomy makes clear he had an incalculable impact on the lives of the people of God. But I'm also fascinated by how the authors don't get into many specifics about the people themselves. Those who were delivered from slavery in Egypt, who were difficult and doubted, but who persevered nonetheless, they too seemingly failed because they didn't make it to their destination either. But while the authors might want them to function as a caricature or an NPC in the story, in reality, people in the wilderness would have had human experiences and stories too, and not just complaints and faulty memory. They would have been fully human, which means they would have made an impact on each other's lives. And in that way, the same as with Moses, they are not failures. And the text makes this clear in a different way, by showing that their children and grandchildren will carry the mantle and keep the faith and continue those random moments of collision and stories. In short, they live. And that'll preach too. And I think it's part of the message the authors, the redactors are trying to share with their audience. Remember, their audience are the Jewish people living in captivity in Babylon centuries after these stories were supposed to have taken place. An audience who had been in captivity long enough to forget some of their people's stories. In captivity long enough to start misremembering what was good and bad about before. People who clearly weren't going to make it back to their ultimate destination. This is a message for them not to be discouraged. A promise that even if they don't make it back into the promised land, their descendants will one day. And in the meantime, it's a call to them to remember what really matters and to choose that, to live. It's a message for us too, isn't it? Maybe the world, as it is right now, is too much for us, too scary, too oppressive. Hope doesn't mean that we have a false optimism that everything is going to turn out okay. Hope does mean we keep fighting, we keep imagining, we keep living. It's a message for those seeking asylum and protection here in the U.S., who now will be forced back into danger and another kind of wilderness altogether. It's an indictment of our leaders too. It's also a message for those of you who don't feel that the world is scary at all. Maybe you find it difficult. Maybe you're striving for success, acclaim, to accumulate, to find your role and your place. Maybe you're hoping to say you've finally arrived. But the truth is that we'll never fully satisfy all our desires. It doesn't make them wrong necessarily, but we'll always fall short of something in the end. The message for you then is the same. Stop putting your heart into things that won't last, your faith into things that don't matter, your time and worries into things which can't be fulfilled. Live this life not to be remembered, but to live. To be part of those random moments of collision and stories, to make a difference in someone else's life simply because you can, because you should. Choose that. To live. I know we can't say with certainty what it was the original authors and redactors were thinking. We do our best to make sense of it every week that we preach. But with all the violence and segregation of tribes in the region within this story, with all the instructions about how to live as their own people, it does make me wonder if those authors ever could have imagined the world as we've been seeing it this month. The people of the world coming together in friendly competition, not war. Even when our leaders are trying the opposite, the fans are saying something entirely different. They're experiencing beautifully random moments of collision, and they're making each other and all of us the better for it. It's all so moving. And not just because play is an intrinsic part of being human, but because making a difference in each other's lives is an intrinsic part of being human too. People in Lawrence, Kansas have adopted Algeria as their team because Algeria chose Kansas as their home base. And so now the people of Lawrence, Kansas are donning green and painting the Algerian flag on their fields. And the Kansas University Jayhawks marching band has learned the national anthem to play it for the team as they practice. Scots swarmed Boston, chanting "No Scotland, no party," drinking pubs dry, putting traffic cones on statues, playing the bagpipes at all hours of the morning, packing out Fenway, but also participating in the goodnight send-off of the Children's Hospital and donating thousands of dollars to local charities. Never mind that when they left for Miami for their next match, many of us felt jealous. There's the Norwegians who are celebrating their first World Cup since the 1990s, and they're spreading their enthusiasm like rolling waves, teaching fans, even from their opponent Senegal, how to do their iconic rowing cheer. And then you can see them performing it on escalators at T-stops and in the streets in Norway and Times Square during yoga sessions. There's Merlin, not actually human, but inspired nonetheless, a real-life duck who wears a jersey and booties and has become the unofficial mascot of Mexico. You've got a Croatian crowd who is walking by and happened upon a wedding party, taking wedding photos, and in the end they got the wedding party, the bride and the groom, to dance with them as they made their way through. The fans from Japan who bring blue plastic bags that they use to cheer, and then after the match, they use them to clean up the stadium. The Argentines who found a wallet after the game, and they made up a song with the owner's name in the song, and then they chanted it until the man realized they were singing his name and had his wallet. And then that created a whole new song and chant when everyone celebrated afterward. Or there's a moment near the end of this book when Rodney and Dawn are reflecting back, and one of them says of a loved one, "He burned so bright." "We all did," his husband responds. People being humans, rehumanizing our world and each other, colliding in random moments of story that will carry on long after them. In some ways, it's the perfect way to understand the underlying message of numbers, that even when we don't notice it all the time, is evident when only our eyes are open to it. That God has blessed you and kept you. God's face has shined upon you and been gracious to you. That God's countenance has been upon you and brought peace. Such is life. So choose, friends, to live.